Commander Elias Vance sat alone in the small control room of Outpost Theta 7. The station was quiet. It was always quiet. That was why he had asked to be sent here, to the edge of known space, where no one bothered him and he bothered no one. Through the thick window, he could see the swirling purple and orange clouds of a massive gas giant. The planet had no name, just a number in some database. Elias liked that. Numbers were simple. Numbers did not ask questions about the war or about the soldiers he had lost on 22B. He checked his screens for the 100th time that day. His job was simple. Watch the border between human space and draconian territory. Report anything unusual. File paperwork that nobody ever read. The Draconians were an old species. Very old. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. They looked like the dragons from old Earth stories, but bigger and smarter. They had scales that changed color, great wings that folded against their backs, and eyes like burning gold. They ruled over dozens of star systems, but their empire was dying. Their population was shrinking. Their colonies were failing. They were proud and powerful, but they were fading away like a fire running out of fuel. They did not like humans. They thought humans were too young, too loud, too messy. Humans lived such short lives. What could they possibly understand about the universe? Elias did not mind what the Draconians thought. He did not plan to meet any of them. He just wanted to be left alone with his silence and his screens and his memories. Then the alert came. A red light flashed on his console. A sound he had never heard before filled the small room. Elias sat up straight and pulled the data onto his main screen. A priority transmission. Emergency frequency. It was coming from a Draconian ship. He listened to the message. The voice was rough and desperate, cutting in and out through heavy static. Reactor breach, guidance systems failing, cannot control descent, impact trajectory confirmed. The voice disappeared into noise. Elias pulled up more information. His fingers moved fast across the controls. The computer showed him a ship, a very large ship, tumbling through space toward a small moon. The moon was called. Even Elias knew about. It was sacred to the Draconians. Once every 100 years, their leaders gathered there for something called the Conclave of Scales. It was the most important event in their civilization. The ship was called the Ascending Flame. It was the flagship of the High Matriarch herself, the supreme leader of all Draconians. And it was going to crash. Elias checked the trajectory again. 43 minutes until impact. The ship was spinning out of control, its engines dark, falling toward the moon like a stone thrown into a well. He opened a communication channel to the nearest Draconian patrol. Draconian patrol vessels, this is Human Outpost Theta 7. Emergency situation. The Ascending Flame is in distress. Please respond. Nothing, just static. He tried again. Any Draconian vessel, please respond. The Ascending Flame will impact in approximately 42 minutes. More static. The patrol ships were too far away, or their communications were blocked, or they simply were not listening to a human frequency. Elias looked at the screen. He looked at the numbers. He looked at the small survey shuttle docked to his station. It was a tiny ship, barely large enough for one person. It was designed for short trips to collect samples from asteroids. It was definitely not designed for rescue missions. He ran the calculations in his head. The shuttle was fast enough to reach the Ascending Flame before impact. Maybe, if he pushed the engines beyond their safe limits, if nothing went wrong, if he was very, very lucky. But then what? What could one human in a tiny shuttle do for a massive Draconian flagship? He was not an engineer. He was not a doctor. He was just a soldier who had run away from his own people to sit in a dark room and watch stars. The ship kept falling, 41 minutes now. Elias thought about the people on that ship. He did not know them. They were Draconians. They probably would not even thank him if he saved them. They might even be angry that a human had interfered. But they were people, living beings, falling toward death while he sat in his comfortable chair and watched. He stood up. "This is stupid," he said out loud to the empty room. "This is really, really stupid." He grabbed his emergency kit and walked to the airlock. The shuttle was cold inside. He had not used it in months. The seat was uncomfortable and the controls were simple, almost primitive compared to the warships he had flown during the war. He powered up the engines. The shuttle shook and hummed. Warning lights told him that what he was about to do was dangerous. He ignored them. "Outpost Theta 7 to anyone listening," he said into the communication system. "I am attempting a rescue operation for the Draconian vessel Ascending Flame. If I do not return, please tell my sister she can have my book collection. She always wanted those old paper books anyway." Nobody answered. He had not expected anyone to. Elias pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle shot away from the outpost like an arrow, racing toward the tumbling giant in the distance. Through his small window, he could see the ascending flame now, a dark shape spinning against the stars. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like watching a great bird fall from the sky. 38 minutes. The shuttle shook as he pushed the engines harder. Red warnings flashed across every screen. The metal around him groaned and creaked. He was flying faster than the shuttle was ever meant to fly. He did not slow down. Ahead of him, the ascending flame grew larger and larger. He could see the damage now. One whole section of the ship was dark and broken. Small explosions flickered along its hull like dying fireflies. Debris floated around it, pieces of metal and glass tumbling through the void. Elias took a deep breath. His hands were steady on the controls. He had been scared many times in his life. He had learned that being scared did not stop you from doing what needed to be done. "Okay," he said to himself, "let's go save some dragons." He aimed his shuttle at the spinning flagship and flew straight into the chaos. High Matriarch had ruled the Draconian sovereignty for 300 years. She had survived 12 assassination attempts. She had won 2 wars. She had watched empires rise and fall like waves upon a shore. In all that time, she had never known true fear. She knew it now. The bridge of the ascending flame was filled with smoke and screaming alarms. Red emergency lights cast strange shadows across the walls. Her crew ran from console to console, trying to fix systems that could not be fixed, trying to save a ship that was already dying. Stood in the center of it all, her wings folded tight against her back. Her scales, normally a beautiful blend of crimson and gold, had gone pale with stress. But her face showed nothing. A matriarch did not show fear, not even when death was 30 minutes away. She knew who had done this. The sabotage was too perfect, too well-timed. Someone on the Council of Scales wanted her dead before she could reach the conclave. Someone who knew about her proposal. For years had watched her people fade. Fewer eggs hatched each season. Colonies that once held millions now held thousands. The great draconian civilization was dying slowly, and everyone pretended not to notice. But had noticed, and she had found a possible solution that many would consider unthinkable. Humans. Those strange, small, short-lived creatures who had burst onto the galactic stage just a few centuries ago. They were not elegant like draconians. They were not wise or patient or refined. They broke things and fixed them wrong and somehow made them work anyway. They lived fast and died fast and never seemed to slow down. And they were everywhere, spreading across the galaxy like fire through dry grass, adapting to every world they touched, breeding and building and growing while the draconians slowly disappeared. Wanted an alliance, trade, cultural exchange, perhaps in time something more. The humans had something her people had lost: energy, hope, the stubborn refusal to accept that some problems could not be solved. But now she would never make her proposal. The ship was falling, and she would die with it, and the draconian sovereignty would continue its slow march toward extinction. Matriarch. She turned toward the voice. Her personal guard was lying on the floor near the main console. A metal beam had fallen during the first explosion and had pushed her out of its path. The beam had struck him instead. Now he lay in a pool of his own blood, his breathing shallow and weak. Knelt beside him. "Do not speak, save your strength." The escape pods gasped, "You must go." The escape pods were destroyed in the explosion. You know this. Closed his eyes. His scales had gone gray. He was dying and they both knew it. Matriarch. The communications officer spoke from across the bridge, her voice strange and confused. "There is a vessel approaching." Looked up, a patrol ship. Did they receive our distress signal? No, Matriarch, it is. The officer checked her console again as if she did not believe what she was seeing. It is very small. The signature is human. For a moment thought she had misheard. Human. There are no human ships in this sector. There is now, Matriarch. It is coming directly toward us, very fast. A voice crackled through the speakers. It was calm and steady, with a strange accent that did not recognize. "Draconian vessel, this is Commander Elias Vance of the Human Coalition. I am going to attempt a hard dock at your port auxiliary airlock. I need you to manually cycle the doors on my mark. The automatic systems are probably fried. Also, does anyone on board know how to do field surgery? I am asking for a friend." Stared at the speaker. The bridge had gone silent. Every draconian had stopped moving, staring at the console as if it had grown teeth. A human. One human, in a ship so small it barely registered on their sensors, flying toward a dying flagship that was about to crash into a moon, flying toward certain death. Why? Did not understand. This made no sense. Humans and draconians were not allies. They were barely acquaintances. Why would a human risk his life for strangers who would not do the same for him? She thought about ignoring the transmission. Pride told her that accepting help from a human was shameful. Tradition told her that the draconian way was to face death with dignity, not to scramble for survival like frightened animals. But was bleeding on the floor. Her crew was terrified, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice asked a dangerous question. What if this human could actually save them? "Respond to the transmission," ordered. Her voice was steady, revealing nothing of her confusion. "Tell the human that the High Matriarch herself will meet him at the airlock." The communications officer hesitated. "Matriarch is that wise. We do not know this human. He could be an enemy. He could be a spy." "He is flying into his own death to help us," said. "If he is an enemy, he is the strangest enemy I have ever seen." She walked toward the door, stepping over debris and fallen crew members. Her wings brushed against the walls of the narrow corridor as she made her way toward the port airlock. 26 minutes until impact. Through the small window in the airlock door, she could see the human ship approaching. It was impossibly small, barely larger than a cargo container. It was shaking and spinning, trying to match the rotation of the ascending flame. The maneuver was insane. No draconian pilot would attempt it. The mathematics alone should have been impossible. But the little ship kept coming, dancing through debris, adjusting its course with tiny bursts of its engines. Closer and closer until could see the cockpit window, could almost see the figure inside. There was a loud clang as the ships connected. The airlock shuddered. Red lights turned green. Took a deep breath and opened the door. The human was smaller than she had expected. He barely reached her chest. He had no scales, no wings, no claws. His skin was soft and brown, his hair dark and messy. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations or symbols of rank. He looked up at her with eyes the color of rich earth, and he smiled. "You are bigger than the briefing materials suggested," he said. Blinked, "You are smaller." "I get that a lot." He pushed past her, already looking down the corridor. Where is your engineering section? We have work to do. 25 minutes until impact. Watched the small human march into her dying ship like he owned it, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Curiosity. The next 40 minutes would become legend among the Draconian people. Songs would be written about them. Children would hear the story before they slept, but in the moment there was no glory. There was only chaos and fire and one small human running through a dying ship. Elias did not stop to think. Thinking was for later when there was time. Right now there was only action. He ran through the corridors of the ascending flame with following close behind. The ship was enormous, built for a species much larger than humans. The ceilings were high enough for draconians to spread their wings. The doors were wide enough for 3 of them to walk side by side. Elias felt like a child running through a giant's castle. But the ship was also dying. Smoke filled the air. Sparks flew from broken cables. The floor tilted and shook as the vessel continued its uncontrolled spin toward the moon below. "Engineering is this way," said, pointing down a corridor filled with flickering lights. Elias ran. His lungs burned from the smoke. His legs ached from the strange gravity, but he did not slow down. The engineering section was worse than he had feared. Half of the consoles were dark. The main reactor was making sounds that no reactor should ever make. The engineering crew stood around looking lost, their golden eyes wide with fear. Elias pushed through them and looked at the main display. He could not read the draconian writing, but numbers were universal. He understood the trajectory data. He understood the power readings. He understood that they had maybe 20 minutes before the ship hit the ground. "I need to see your navigation system," he said. "The main computer is dead, but there should be backup systems somewhere." "The backup systems are in the secondary control room," one of the engineers said. "But the power lines to that section have been cut." "Then we route power from somewhere else." Elias looked around the room. "What still has power? Weapons, shields, life support." "Life support is on emergency reserves. Weapons are offline, the shields." The engineer paused. "The shields still have power, but we cannot lower them while the ship is spinning. The feedback would destroy the generators." "I do not need the shields," Elias said. "I need their power cables." He spent the next 5 minutes explaining his plan. The draconian engineers looked at him like he was insane. What he was suggesting went against every rule of starship engineering. It was dangerous. It was stupid. It would probably kill them all even faster than crashing would. Elias did it anyway. He crawled through maintenance tunnels that were too small for draconians. He pulled cables and reconnected wires. He burned his hands on hot metal and cut his arms on sharp edges. When he emerged from the tunnels, he was covered in grease and blood and soot. But the navigation console in the secondary control room flickered to life. "I have control," he said into his communicator. "Partial control. Maybe 30% thrust on the starboard engines. It is not enough to stop us, but it might be enough to slow us down." He heard his voice through the static. "Do it." Elias fired the engines. The ship groaned and shuddered. The spin slowed just a little. The trajectory line on his screen shifted just a little. It was not enough. They were still going to crash, but now they might crash slowly enough for some people to survive. "What else can we do?" he asked himself. Then he remembered the shuttle. His shuttle still docked to the port airlock. It was small, but it had engines. It had thrust, and it was positioned perfectly to push against the ship's spin. "Commander Vance, to anyone listening," he said into his communicator. "I am going to detach my shuttle and use its engines to help stabilize the ship. When I give the signal, I need someone to fire the port maneuvering thrusters. Just a short burst. 2 seconds, no more." "That will tear your shuttle apart," said. "Probably," Elias agreed, "but it might work." He ran back through the corridors, faster now because he knew the way. When he reached the airlock, he found waiting for him You will die, she said. Maybe, he looked up at her, his breath coming in gasps, but maybe not. Humans are harder to kill than we look. Why are you doing this? We are strangers to you. We are not even your people. Elias thought about the question. He thought about the war, about the soldiers he had lost, about the guilt he had carried for years. He thought about sitting alone in his outpost, watching stars and waiting to die. Because someone needed help, he said simply, and I was there. He climbed into his shuttle and closed the airlock. Through the small window he could see watching him. Her expression was strange, something he could not read. He detached the shuttle and flew around the ascending flame, positioning himself against its spin. His engine screamed as he pushed against a ship 10,000 times his size. Warning lights filled his cockpit. The hull began to crack. Now, he said into his communicator, fire the thrusters now. The ascending flame's port thrusters fired. The shuttle shuddered and groaned. For a moment, everything hung in perfect balance, two forces pushing against each other. Then the spin stopped. The ship was still falling, but it was no longer tumbling. The remaining engines could push against the descent now. The trajectory line shifted again, more this time. On his screen, Elias watched the numbers change. Impact time stretched from minutes to hours. The ship was no longer going to crash. It was going to enter orbit. Rough, unstable orbit, but orbit. They were going to live. Elias laughed, a tired and broken sound. Then he remembered the guard who had been bleeding on the bridge. He flew his damaged shuttle back to the airlock and docked again. When he climbed out, was there. The ship is stable, she said. You saved us. Not yet, Elias said. Where is the wounded guard, the one who was bleeding on the bridge? He is in the medical bay, but our doctors say they cannot stop the bleeding. The damage is too severe. Take me to him. Elias had never performed surgery on a draconian. He did not know their anatomy. He did not know which organs were important or where their blood vessels ran. But he had a medical kit designed for humans, and he had steady hands, and he had something that the draconian doctors did not have. Desperation. He worked for 20 minutes, using tools that were too small for draconian bodies, making adjustments that no textbook would approve. He sealed wounds with a plasma cutter meant for metal. He stitched flesh with thread meant for cloth. When lost too much blood, Elias checked the medical database, found that human blood could be temporarily compatible with draconian physiology, and donated his own. He gave too much. He knew he was giving too much, but was still alive, still fighting, and Elias refused to let him die. When the last wound was sealed, once breathing had steadied, Elias tried to stand up. The room spun around him. His vision went dark. He heard call his name, but it sounded very far away. He fell, but he did not hit the ground. Strong arms caught him, wings folding around him like a warm blanket. He looked up and saw golden eyes, filled with something he did not understand. Rest now, human, said softly. You have done enough. Elias closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. Elias woke up in a room made of black stone and crystal. Light came from glowing stones set into the walls, casting soft blue shadows across everything. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. The bed beneath him was too large, clearly built for someone much bigger than a human. He tried to sit up. His body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached. His arms were covered in bandages. A tube ran from his arm to a strange machine that hummed quietly beside the bed. You have been unconscious for 3 days. Elias turned his head. A draconian stood in the doorway, wearing the white robes of a doctor. The doctor's scales were pale green, and his eyes watched Elias with open curiosity. 3 days. Elias' voice was rough and weak. You lost a great deal of blood, too much blood, honestly. We were not certain you would wake at all. The doctor moved closer, checking the machines beside the bed. You are the first human to ever set foot on, Commander Vance. You are also the first human to ever give blood to a draconian, lives because of you. Elias tried to smile. Good, that is good. The conclave has been interesting since your arrival. You have caused quite a stir. Some of the matriarchs wish to give you a medal, others wish to dissect you for study. I would prefer the medal if anyone asks. The doctor made a sound that might have been a laugh. The High Matriarch has made her position clear. You are under her protection. No one will harm you. Over the next few days, Elias learned more about his situation. The Conclave of Scales was a gathering of the 7 matriarchs who ruled the draconian sovereignty. They met once every 100 years to make decisions that would shape the future of their civilization. The meeting was held on a moon considered sacred by their people. And now, thanks to Elias, it was also hosting its first human guest. Not everyone was happy about this. You should not be here, said Matriarch on the 4th day. She was old even by draconian standards, her scales faded to a dull bronze. This is a sacred place. Your presence offends the ancestors. Elias bowed his head respectfully. I apologize for any offense, Matriarch. I did not mean to intrude. I only meant to help. Help made a harsh sound. You humans always want to help. You spread across the galaxy like a disease, helping wherever you go. And everywhere you help, you change things. You break traditions. You upset the natural order. With respect, Matriarch, the natural order was about to kill everyone on the ascending flame. Had no response to that. She turned and walked away, her wings rustling with anger. But not all the matriarchs were hostile. Thessaly, the youngest of the 7, seemed genuinely fascinated by Elias. She asked him endless questions about human culture, human history, human biology. How do you survive without scales? She asked one afternoon, walking beside him through the crystal gardens. Your skin is so soft. Does it not hurt when things touch you? Sometimes, Elias admitted, we learn to be careful. And you truly live for only 80 or 90 years. That seems so cruel. How do you accomplish anything in such a short time? Elias thought about the question. We do not wait, he said finally. Humans cannot afford to wait. If we want something, we go after it immediately. If we see a problem, we try to fix it right away. We do not have time to be patient. Thessaly's golden eyes studied him with new understanding. Perhaps that is why you flew into death to save strangers. You did not have time to be cautious. Maybe, or maybe I am just not very smart. Thessaly laughed, a musical sound that echoed off the crystal walls. I like you, human. I hope my mother decides not to dissect you. The political situation was complicated. Had come to the conclave to propose an alliance with humanity, but the sabotage of her ship had disrupted everything. The other matriarchs were suspicious. Someone among them had tried to kill, and no one knew who. Elias found himself drawn into the intrigue whether he wanted to be or not. He was a witness. He was evidence. And after announced the debt bond, he was also her official advisor. What exactly is a debt bond? He asked her one evening, standing on a balcony overlooking a sea of stars. Was quiet for a moment. When one draconian saves another's life at great personal risk, a bond is formed. It is sacred. It means your life is joined to mine until I release you. And you cannot just release me. I could, but it would be seen as dishonorable. It would weaken my position before the conclave. So I am your prisoner. Turned to look at him. In the starlight, her scales seemed to glow. You are my advisor, Commander Vance, the first human to ever hold such a position. I suggest you take it seriously. Elias took it seriously. Over the next 3 weeks, he attended meetings, studied reports, and learned more about draconian politics than he had ever wanted to know. He discovered that the sabotage had been planned by a faction that opposed any contact with humans. They believed that draconians should face extinction with dignity rather than seek help from lesser species. Elias exposed them by accident. He was simply asking questions, trying to understand how the ship systems worked, when he noticed inconsistencies in the maintenance logs. One thing led to another, and soon 3 members of the conservative faction were under arrest. He also made friends in unexpected places. A young lord challenged him to a duel after Elias accidentally insulted his family honor. Elias did not know how to fight with draconian weapons, so he suggested a drinking contest instead. The lord agreed, thinking he would easily defeat the small human. Elias won. Draconians, it turned out, had very low tolerance for human alcohol. The young lord became one of his strongest supporters. At a formal dinner, Elias noticed that his food tasted strange. He quietly set it aside and ate nothing else that evening. The next day, 3 kitchen servants were arrested for attempting to poison him. "How did you know?" asked him afterward. "I did not know," Elias admitted. "I just do not eat things I cannot identify. It is a habit from the war." Looked at him for a long moment. "You are a very strange creature, Commander Vance." "I have been told that before." When the final vote came, his proposal passed by a narrow margin. The draconian sovereignty would open formal relations with humanity. Trade agreements would be signed. Cultural exchanges would begin. It was not an alliance, not yet, but it was a beginning. That night, Elias sat alone in his quarters, looking at the stars through his window. He should have felt happy. He had helped make history. He had changed the relationship between 2 civilizations. But he just felt tired and alone. There was a knock at his door. When he opened it, was standing there. "The conclave is over," she said. "Your work here is finished. A ship is being prepared to take you back to human space." Elias nodded. "Thank you, matriarch, for everything." Hesitated. For a moment she looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. "The ship leaves tomorrow at dawn," she said finally. "You should rest." She turned and walked away before he could respond. Elias closed his door and stood in the darkness, wondering why his chest felt so heavy. The night before Elias was supposed to leave, he could not sleep. He walked through the empty corridors of the Crystal Palace, his footsteps echoing against the cold stone floors. The guards nodded as he passed but did not stop him. After 3 weeks, everyone knew the strange human who had saved the matriarch. He found himself on the observation terrace, a wide platform that looked out over the surface of and the endless sea of stars beyond. The view was beautiful. The moon's surface glowed silver in the light of distant suns. The gas giant hung on the horizon like a great purple eye. Elias stood at the edge of the terrace and tried to understand what he was feeling. He should have been eager to leave. This place was strange and foreign. He did not belong here. He was a human among dragons, a short-lived creature among immortals. Every day, someone reminded him that he did not fit. But he did not want to go. He thought about his outpost, waiting for him in the empty darkness of space. He thought about the silence, the loneliness, the endless days of watching screens and filing reports. He had asked for that life. He had wanted it once. Now the thought of returning made him feel sick. "You should be sleeping." Elias did not turn around. He had known she would come. Somehow he had known. "So should you," he said. Walked up beside him, her wings folded close against her back. She wore simple clothes tonight, not the ceremonial armor of a matriarch. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "I wanted to see this view one more time," Elias said. "The stars look different from here. Colder, I think, but cleaner. Does that make sense?" "Yes," said quietly, "it makes sense." They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the stars together. "You do not have to leave," said finally. Elias smiled sadly. "The debt bond thing. Your advisor explained that it is mostly ceremonial. I know you do not really need a human advisor. I would just be in the way." "I am not speaking of the debt bond." Elias turned to look at her. Her golden eyes were fixed on the stars, refusing to meet his gaze. Her scales had shifted to a deeper red. The color he had learned meant strong emotion. "I do not understand your species," she said, the words coming faster now, spilling out like water through a broken dam. "You live such short lives. You are fragile and small and soft. You break so easily. I have seen warriors stronger than you fall from wounds half as severe. But you flew into your own death to save strangers," she continued. "You gave your blood for a warrior who would have killed you without a second thought 3 months ago. You smiled when assassins tried to poison you. You made friends with the lord who challenged you to a duel. You learned to read our language because you thought it was polite. I still cannot pronounce most of the words." "That is not the point," finally looked at him. Her eyes were bright, almost glowing. "I have lived 300 years. I have met kings and generals and scholars and heroes. I have never met anyone like you." Elia's heart was beating fast now. He was not sure what was happening, but he knew it was important. "When you are not present," continued, "I am. Less. The room feels empty. The conversations feel dull. I find myself looking for you, listening for your voice, wondering what you would think about this problem or that decision." "This is unacceptable." Her voice cracked slightly. "It is inconvenient. It is terrifying. You are going to die in 60 years, 70 if you are lucky. That is nothing to me. That is a blink. And yet the thought of you leaving tomorrow makes me feel like I cannot breathe." The silence stretched between them. Elia said slowly, carefully, "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I do not know what you think I am saying." She looked away again. "Human expressions are impossible to read." "You just described falling in love with me." Her scales flushed an even deeper red, spreading from her neck to the tips of her wings. "I did not use that word." "You did not have to." Elias reached out and took her hand. It was strange, holding a hand with scales instead of skin, claws instead of fingernails. But it was also warm, alive, real. "I am not going back to human space," he said. Stared at him. "What?" "I sent my resignation 2 weeks ago, right after the vote passed." He smiled up at her. "I thought I might stick around for a while, help with the treaty negotiations, learn to cook draconian food. It is going to take a while, honestly. I keep setting things on fire." "You resigned," she sounded stunned. "You gave up your position. Why?" "Because someone needed help," he said, echoing his words from the ship. "And I was here." "That is not a real answer." "Okay, fine." Elias took a deep breath. "Because for 3 weeks I watched you fight for your people. I watched you face assassination attempts and political enemies and the slow death of your civilization. And I watched you refuse to give up. I watched you hope when there was no reason to hope." He squeezed her hand. "And I thought maybe I could do that too. Maybe I could stop hiding in the dark and actually try to live again. Maybe, if I stayed here with you, I could figure out how to be brave again." Was silent. "Also," Elias added, "I think I might be falling in love with you, which is terrifying and inconvenient and probably very stupid, considering you are going to live for another 1,000 years, and I am going to be dead before your next birthday. We do not celebrate birthdays." "That is not the point." Laughed. It was a sound Elias had never heard from her before, bright and free and young. She pulled him closer, and he felt her wings fold around him like a warm blanket. 60 years, she said softly. 70 if we are lucky. Is that enough? It will have to be. When she kissed him, carefully, mindful of her teeth, Elias decided that 70 years might be enough after all. Above them, the stars burned cold and clean. The universe stretched on forever, full of wars and wonders, civilizations rising and falling like waves upon a shore. But on that small terrace on that sacred moon, none of that mattered. There was only a dragon and a human, standing together in the darkness, refusing to be alone. The Human Draconian Alliance would become the most powerful coalition in the galaxy. Historians would debate the causes for decades. Economists would point to trade benefits. Generals would cite military strength. Scholars would discuss cultural exchange. But those who were there, those who saw it begin, knew the truth. It started with a single human in a ship too small, flying toward disaster because someone needed help, and a dragon who fell in love with him for it.